How is your customer service? How is your responsiveness? Can you be responsive in the event of a crisis?
It's an ultra competitive business. We're talking Shark Tank, dog eat dog kind of business.
You go to Google, you Google your own name, and then you look for news associated with your name, your brand name, your company name.
Tips, tricks, secrets, how they do things.
Each borrower has a budget. They have a budget for what they can spend monthly.
Hi, folks, and welcome to 80 Mortgage Insights, where our goal is to assist our partners in identifying tools and resources to help them win more deals. I'm Jerry Byers, Senior Content Manager for 80 Mortgage. Many brokers are faced with challenges of brand image, crisis management, and reputation, but they don't have the services of public relations firms or reputation management staff. Our guest today is not only a pro in the PR field, but caters specifically to the mortgage industry. A friend to 80 Mortgage, and to me personally, she's agreed to share some strategies and thoughts on how mortgage professionals from firms big and small can best prepare themselves for growth and potential adversity. Allison Austin is one of the founding partners of Gaffney Austin Agency. I sat down with her to have a lengthy conversation on topics I believe you'll find useful. So let's get started. Allison, hi, super great to see you. I'm incredibly excited to get a chance to talk to you because I think that the topic today is one of those things that not enough people are paying attention to. We're so busy looking at growing our business and focusing on income and taking care of our borrowers and finding the best deals that oftentimes we're overlooking some of the things that maybe are in our blind side. And so I wanted to bring you on here because you're an expert in this. So first, let's have you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into some really great question and answers.
Great. My name is Allison Austin, and I am one half of a small public relations firm, Gaffney Austin. And Gaffney Austin entirely concentrates our business on mortgage, real estate, and fintech. So if it has to do with the housing transaction and the mortgage transaction, those are the people who would be good clients for us. We've gotten to know the industry very well. Our firm is 6 years old. Prior to that, I spent 10 years with a company called CoreLogic. You now know it as Cotality. It changed its name to Cotality fairly recently. And that must have been a big endeavor, which we could get into later. But I was at CoreLogic for 10 years. My business partner, Jacob Gaffney, was at Housing Wire. And Housing Wire is a dedicated publication that leans into housing, mortgage, fintech, and insurance. So he and I had worked together for years. I would pitch him stories. He would take some of my stories, and sometimes he wouldn't. We started a friendship. And when we both put our heads together, said we'd both been with our respective firms for about 10 years. He with Housing Wire and me with CoreLogic. I was reporting to the C-suite. I was the spokesperson for the company, and it was an opportunity for two individuals with many, many years of real estate and fintech experience to come together and build a firm to serve this industry and bring some of our clients into the media and get their brand recognized outside of maybe a smaller circle. Can we increase their voice and their reputation? That's what we aim to do. So that's what Gaffney Austin does in the real estate, mortgage, and fintech industries.
No, that's fantastic. And so, let's start with what our viewers really want to know most, which is why is crisis response, brand protection, and crisis management in general something that they should be taking in consideration and finding some solutions for?
I think the important thing with your brand is, and you are an individual working very hard to move your business forward, but just the way you make your friends and you build your networks, part of that is your reputation. And your reputation is your brand and how you handle yourself in any type of situation. How is your customer service? How is your responsiveness? Can you be responsive in the event of a crisis? And that's when a public relations firm can be very helpful. But if you're a good steward of your brand, you're always looking at your reputation. What am I doing in the public? Am I working in a volunteer capacity? Am I showing up for my clients in a way other than just processing their loan? And so your reputation and your brand can get you much further just by putting your best foot forward at all times, whether you're doing that personally or whether you use a public relations firm like Gaffney Austin.
Okay, no, that's great. And so let's say, could you share like kind of a checklist? Let's say, I'm an MLO or I'm a broker in a small firm, maybe even a medium to large firm. What kind of a checklist of sorts can I use to just kind of guide me in developing a plan for my image and my, crisis management, loss prevention kind of thing, all those things. What is there like a checklist or something I should be doing?
One of the first things I would do, and we always encourage our clients to do this, go ahead and set up a Google search with your own name, your own brand name, and keywords associated with your brand. Maybe even some of your competitors' names. And that way, a message comes into you. You can set it up, it's a free service. You go to Google, you Google your own name, and then you look for news associated with your name, your brand name, your company name. And Google will ask you, would you like to set up a search for this? So now you, on a daily basis, will receive an email. You can be more frequent than that. I might encourage you to use your brand name and have it email you every time your brand is mentioned. But once a day is certainly plenty during a time when you are not in the middle of a crisis. But the first thing is set up an alert. Alert yourself when your brand comes into the news. The next thing is establish with your leadership or anyone else in your line of command, chain of command, that would have to approve a statement before you make a statement. The media really doesn't like no comment. So, is there a holding statement that you can come up with? So, before a crisis were to ever occur, it's just like you might have your mission or your tagline with your brand. That's been approved by leaders and people above you. Or even if you're a single operation shop, if you are the go-to person for loans in your community, that might be your brand and what you have written. That's been approved. You can stand behind that. If a crisis were to happen, what would you say? What would your holding statement be? You don't need to go out with the news media and say it until they come and ask you if they understand that there's been a crisis associated with your name or your brand.
Okay, no,
Make sure
that's a
you do
great
your
point.
research. Know who might come to you. So those are a couple of things. Create an alert and create a holding statement that can let the media know what you know so far, if it's an evolving crisis, what you know so far, and get that approved. To scramble and get something approved is going to waste and lose a lot of time in the middle of a crisis. Be prepared well ahead of time. Statements are approved, and you are monitoring the news media if your name appears in the news media that was unbeknownst to you.
No, and I think that's a great point because again, oftentimes we get shell shocked by not knowing something's happening and someone asks us, and then our emotional response is to, what does that have to do with me? Or we say something that isn't exactly putting us in the best light. Either one makes it look like we don't know what the heck they're talking about, or we don't know what the heck we're talking about. And having a just a plan in place,
Yeah.
which is, that's a very good question. We're always trying to do X. Like, like I think we had this conversation before, and you said, just answer the question you want them to ask you. And if you don't know the answer to the question they did ask you, and just put that out there. I think this is a great point that not enough people are thinking about. I equate it to when you're driving down the road and you just kind of envision, is that person going to cut in front of me? And what would I do if they did? Where if we think in those terms, it just helps us be more prepared. Doesn't necessarily mean bad stuff's going to happen, but at least we're prepared. So, no, great point. What are some common errors, like misunderstandings, when you see from mortgage professionals, about branding, crisis management, about preparing themselves to have the best look, out there facing forward to the public?
I think sometimes people are not putting themselves in someone else's shoes. If I were to see a crisis unfolding, what would put my clients at ease that I have made the right decision to go with a knowledgeable lender, and that lender even can protect me through a data breach, can protect me through the threat of fraud or identity theft. When you are looking for a loan, you are likely starting by casting your net rather wide. Once you have cast your net, the internet will start to pick up on your patterns. So make sure that you're protected and that any loan company or loan officer that you choose to work with are they protecting your data? So I think that's something that a loan officer needs to make sure they have all of the compliance and necessary safeguards in place to bring a client into their business, and they will safeguard their address, their social security number, their family members. All of that information is tied down and not accessible by any outside vendors. So make sure you're running a tight ship, and always be prepared for that. If you see another brand have an encounter that you would not want to happen to your company, go through those steps in your mind. What might I have done to react differently than I saw my competitor react? Use that as a example or even a dry run. Can you dry run through that problem and put yourself in the best light? What would I have said if the media came and asked me about that? I'm going to go ahead and think through that so I don't have to think through that in the midst of a serious crisis happening at my company.
No, that's a great point. Like I said, it's anticipating the bad stuff that not necessarily going to happen. We hope it doesn't happen, of course. But we need to be prepared for it. It's like writing a will, so to speak. Um, so that how about, you've been in this industry a long time. So I'm sure that perhaps you have some good stories of times when your image and brand or a crisis happens and you've had to adjust. Can you share anything with us, or even if it's ambiguous, that's fine.
Yeah, I think something that happened to me when I was at a large company, there are many things going on in the industry. And so we're always observing the industry. But even some things can happen, like a Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement, where someone feels they're being harassed. But in the midst of a Black Lives Matter crisis, everyone is heightened. How are they being treated? How are you treating your customers? And in a sexual harassment situation, does HR understand all of the hierarchy and how employees are being treated? Is there training that you can have? Is there sensitivity training that you can go through? Even individually, can you sit through a webinar that might offer sensitivity training? And in so you don't realize that even something like Black Lives Matter, and we had an employee who came in contact and was recorded, and it appeared on Facebook. And then people without details of what had happened, they moved forward and started making accusations across Facebook and across other social media channels. And it was coming back on the company that I worked for. I had to come out and indicate that this is not something that we would condone. We believed that the event was not sanctioned by the company, and you have to say that. If an individual is at a public event that was not part of your company, they are out there enjoying themselves in their community, but your company name might become affiliated with that crisis incident. So how do you separate yourself from that employee, understand the event and how it occurred, and be able to prepare or create scenarios where you can learn from that, learn from what you've just experienced, and put safeguards in place to remind employees when they are on their own time, they don't have to and might not want to wear a shirt with your logo on it. They can do anything they would like in their own time, but make sure that they're representing themselves. There are some companies that ask you to put on your social media, any opinions I have are I've expressed are mine. And you might want to put a safeguard like that in place for your company. So if someone wants to express themselves and see something that they're watching their own community, it does there is a safeguard that says, I'm speaking on my own behalf. I'm not speaking on behalf of my company or the place where I work. So those are things that you might want to consider. It's not always industry events that are happening, but it's things that are happening in the entire economy and political ecosystem that we all live in right now.
No, and it's volatile without a doubt, especially with social media nowadays. I think about it, when even when I was young, this many years ago, we didn't even have the internet, and whatnot. Even then, if an employee got accused of something, oftentimes it created a negative impact on the firm, even though they had nothing to do with each other. And of course, so we have, take the NFL for instance. I remember, when the NFL started instituting a policy of you have to, do certain things in order to be a player in this league. And if you go outside the lines of that, you face suspension and fines and so on and so forth. I of course would hope that none of our viewers are in a position where these things are big issues. But at the same time, if you're a small business and you're trying to scale your business up and add some MLOs, add some more staff, and try to scale to that next level of a brokerage, then those are things that you want to keep in mind. As you get bigger, you also become a little bit more we'll say it, you might become a target more often. I mean, it just increases the likelihood. Um,
Yeah, even as a single provider, sometimes you realize you're only responsible for your own line of business. And then you start adding people. When you add people, you add HR concerns, you add tax and uh, compliance concerns. So a single provider can certainly watch out for their own reputation, but the larger your team grows, the more faces you have associated with your brand, and the larger your brand may become. You want to scale up, that's good for business, but you have to bring on the right people that will support whether it's a public relations person, a human resources person, your accountant. If your business has grown so large that you need to employ those additional people, that's when you've built a team and now you've got to protect that team and that brand.
No, and that's a great point. And so, just to kind of rewind here, some things that I think are probably pretty important, and you can give me your feedback on this, is we have some resources in the industry, in the mortgage and banking industry in general, through some of our associations, like, for instance, MBA and NAMB and whatnot. And I know that a lot of them provide some really good guidelines and just kind of like cheat sheets on here's things that you should be looking at or whatnot for legal advice, for data security, and making sure that you're protecting the privacy of the files that you're handling and things like that. So of course that's a great resource as well. Um, do you have any suggestions on how important are local and national organizations like this, do you think, to mortgage professionals? Are they worth it? I mean, because if I'm a small firm, I mean, membership fees can be a little pricey, and I got a lot of other expenses. I mean, would you say it's a priority, or what are your thoughts?
I think post-pandemic, many of these meetings are not in person, and they weren't in person for several years during the pandemic. There's now far more networking on webinars and on the internet and through social media. You are doing networking. Even something like this is an opportunity to get your brand out. If you have an opportunity to participate in a podcast and let your thought leadership shine, go ahead and do that. If you have to get permission from someone up the chain from you, go ahead and get that permission. But take advantage of something like this. You can also go to your local MBA events. Many mortgage bankers associations have state-run affiliates or even locals. The National Association of Realtors, state organizations, and national organizations. Choose one or two of those meetings a year that you can attend in person. Is it at a city that's easy for you to get to? Is it is there one closer to your location? If you are in the Southeast, like you guys are, I think if you can attend a Florida meeting or if you can attend a Georgia meeting, even something on the East Coast, I think if getting to a meeting in person at least once a year, but that does mean budgeting for it. It means budgeting for the membership, budgeting for the event and travel to the event and any other incidentals. But in person meetings are very good. Short of that, webinars, podcasts, social social networking across social media is another way to do it.
No, that's a great point. And like I said, you can always reach out to people you find on LinkedIn and your network and to say, hey, how do you handle this? Or do you have a lawyer? Or do you hire services or do you have a PR firm? And just get some feedback from the people that are also in the industry. And that's your peers often have good answers. And ironically, as competitive as this business is, this always amazes me. It's an ultra competitive business. We're talking Shark Tank, dog eat dog kind of business. And yet, when I see brokers from different firms, MLOs from, different places all over the country, it's amazing. It's just amazing to me that they just share tips, tricks, secrets, how they do things. There is no I don't see a whole lot of oh, well, that's like a trade secret of how I handle these things. Instead, they're very generous with
At the
sharing that
end of the day,
information.
it is a small industry. And the reason that I think so many of them are open and friendly is that you may find yourself working with that individual at another company.
That's
You
right.
may find yourself doing a joint venture with that company. There are some very large brand names like Fannie and Freddie. Those companies bring so many of us together. They do work with so many of us. It is to their advantage not to pit each loan officer or lending institution against one another, but in order to sell more loans in such a competitive market, we want consumers to have a roof over their head. It's part of the American dream, and getting a homeowner into their next property, their first property, it may be through a joint venture that you're doing with someone else. It may be a down payment assistance program. You may give business to a former colleague of yours because you knew that they really had some expertise in something that you are not as strong in. At the end of the day, it's a very small industry, and you will find yourself shoulder to shoulder with that person sooner than you might expect.
No, and that's a good reason. Just be friendly, make friends with everybody, and share what you have, and listen to what others are offering. And I really do think there's enough room for everybody to be successful together. And that's been our philosophy at AD for a long time. And our leader Max, he said this, he continues to say it. I'm sure he will continue to say it in the future, and that is there's no reason why a borrower, a lender, and the MLO in between, our partners, can't all work together to get the best possible outcome. And when they do that, we end up seeing um, wins all across the board. Everyone wins, and there's no reason why that can't happen on a regular basis. And I think it's very true in the mortgage industry. Maybe not so true in every other industry. There's no there's no loser in that game, so to speak. And so that's I think a very good positive. How about this? Industry's moving fast. You and I have talked about this in the past, and I just wanted you to touch on this a little bit if you can. And that is, what do you see happening in the industry that's encouraging, but also maybe some things that are concerning in the industry? Maybe it's tech, maybe just regulation, things along those lines that you see, because you get a really broad picture where you're at.
Well, I think the most important thing that we're looking at right now is interest rates, and people remain frustrated by an elevated interest rates. Interest rates have settled down right now at about 6%. They've been as high as 8% back in probably 2023. They got as high as 8%. I think we need to understand that Each borrower has a budget. They have a budget for what they can spend monthly. Can we find an interest rate, whether it's a 30-year mortgage, 15-year mortgage, that interest rate is favorable and can meet that monthly budget? The monthly budget is not only the mortgage. You've got to encourage your client to look at the HOA fees, the home ownership fees. Sometimes it's called a maintenance fee. Their insurance. Insurance is important. There are some states where insurance is becoming out of reach. So not only is it the mortgage payment, but it's the insurance payment, the tax payment, and any maintenance. And even if you live in a community that does not have an HOA or a maintenance fee, you still have maintenance. And people act so relieved when they get into a community that doesn't have a maintenance fee. You take on that maintenance fee, you're now mowing your lawn. You now have to, clean your own gutters. You have to do your own things. So what does that monthly budget look like? And at an interest rate of 6%, can you still get your client into the home that they want? What are the compromises they will have to make? You can work through with that person on their down payment. Are there down payment assistance programs? What is the percentage that they will need to put down in order to qualify for the loan? Encourage your client to keep their credit score up. If their credit score is strong, then they may be paying a more favorable interest rate. So I think with interest rates around 6%, we need to begin to budget now for exactly what that is going to cost. The idea that interest rates are going to drop back down to 2 and 3 and 4% is really probably out of reach. That is not going to happen. And don't work with your client and tell them, "Oh, you can refinance in a few years." as as things continue on this about 5 or 6%, maybe something they need to budget for the foreseeable future.
No, and that's a great point, and I'm glad you brought up taxes and insurance because this has become a problem, and we could do a whole other segment on this because it's such an issue, and I see this all the time, and that is, folks that their property taxes go up because the value of the houses go up,
Yeah.
and that's not something that they are looking at when they sign that loan, and but it is something that has to be considered because as their property taxes go up, their escrow gets thrown out of whack, and then they're having to make up that escrow payment. And so those things, also insurance rates, gosh, especially in the southeast, where storms galore, these things become really challenging. So yeah, I'm glad you pointed that out. How about advice? Okay, you and I, neither one of us are MLOs. Neither, at least not that I'm aware of. You're not an MLO, but so we're not in charge of acquiring the file, getting it started, getting it start to finish. There's a lot of people in our industry, whether they're in underwriting, whether they're in an administrative position, they're in marketing, like I am, and like you are. Um, let's let's look at those kinds of people who are in this industry, but they're not MLOs. What advice might you give to them? You've been associated with this for a long time, and they might be new and they're like, okay, well, I want to make a career out of this. Is there a career to be made in mortgage for someone who's not a loan officer?
I think so. And I think what you want to do if you're new to this industry is identify a mentor. You could find a mentor at one of these annual or monthly meetings in your own state. An annual meeting, you might see a speaker who you want to get to know and follow them. You can follow them on social media. That is at no bother to them, but you're seeing some of the things that they're saying in the industry, and you may agree with those points. Interact with that individual on social media or reach out to that individual. Many people offer a webinar every few months. Attend that webinar, get to know a little bit more about what your mentor might be teaching. I think anyone in the industry wants to impart knowledge to younger people or other people and their peers in the industry, and that's a great opportunity. So I'd say someone new entering this industry, they want to find a mentor, be a sponge, read the things around you, read some headlines, cut time every day to devote to just reading some headlines and digging into some articles. One of my best tips is if you have daily and weekly meetings or calls, I always find myself logging on to the meeting maybe 5 minutes early. So as I've logged on and waiting for my peers to log on, I use that time to scan some headlines. I use that time to read the agenda. What are we going to be discussing today and what can I contribute to that? Do I have anything to say? Am I seeing anything in the news? Am I seeing any headlines that might have to do with today's agenda? I'm about to go into a meeting with a client. Let me scan the headlines and see if I can see my client's name, my client's competitor's name, and never be afraid to forward an article or something to another person. Many articles are behind paywalls, and you can say to someone, this might be behind a paywall, but I think it mentions your company name. Let's read this article. I have a subscription to this publication. Let me share this article with you because I think this topic is important enough. But I think sharing information, finding your mentor, finding ways to follow the people that you feel are contributing the most to the industry in a way that you want to emulate, get to know those individuals. I think that can help you decide, is this an industry I really want to be in? Like I said, small industry. You could find yourself working for that person years down the road or working at a company where that person is or has been employed. So go ahead and start your networking early.
You bring up a great point, and I do this unconsciously now because someone much like you taught me this a long time ago. I show up for meetings early, and so I'm logged on, especially like Zoom meetings even. And I use that time when other people log on to develop relationships. So I ask them questions. What are you guys working on now? And well, that's exciting. And anything I can be a help with this, or I'll ask them questions, on how to solve certain issues and whatnot. But that relationship building with those people that know more than I do, which is often, then that's a chance for me to get to know them and for them to understand that I'm a pretty nice guy and maybe talking to me isn't so bad. But it's one of my favorite sayings is none of us is as smart as all of us.
Right.
Okay. And you're in a meeting, the meeting hasn't started, you're sitting around, and most people, I see a lot of people don't even turn on their cameras yet in some of these meetings. But a good rule of thumb is just take that extra couple minutes to say, hey, so and so, I saw that article that you wrote, or I saw this project you're working on. It looks really cool. What are you guys doing next, or whatever? Those relationships matter.
Yeah,
And um, and
agreed.
people don't care what you know until they know how much you care. Here we are on full of tropes today. And so if you show interest, I think you'll find that a lot of people with knowledge are willing to share their expertise with you. That's been my experience personally, but it's kind of dovetails off of what you were saying, of course. But no, the great answers. So, wrapping this up, because I've taken enough of your time and you've been super gracious, and I totally appreciate it. Uh, you're in PR, okay? Let's just as a final thought, you're a small firm or you're a medium to growing firm. What are some things that you would say are like priority things? If you're like A, B, and C, these priority things to improve your image publicly that you can do that are low cost and easily accessible to anybody. Could you just give like, I don't know, just one, two, three tips or tricks on getting their brand out there and themselves?
Yeah, I think if I give you one or two or three, I would tell anyone never consider these in the order that I place them in. You may decide that volunteering is something that you want to do and you're going to place a premium on that. Now, your choices are, do you volunteer in something where you're going to meet more people in your industry, or do you purposely break out of your industry and volunteer with pets or animals? And that's not necessarily in your industry. Or do you want to find yourself volunteering for a charity that will get to low income individuals that are trying to step up? You're very good at managing your finances. Could you be someone who can be a mentor in your community in the form of volunteering? So I think that might be one thing that you could do with your brand. Another thing that you could do is get involved in something like a podcast like this. I looked at a list of podcasts the other day. There is almost no podcast name that's available. Everyone has taken every podcast name. So you don't have to have your own podcast. You can be on a podcast. You can reach out to a podcast that you like to listen to and tell them that you have some expertise in one of the subjects that you've heard them mention before. And frequently, a podcast host will put out a note saying, I'm looking for podcast guests with these particular skills.
Mhm.
Go ahead and participate or try and participate in something like a podcast or a webinar where you can impart some of your knowledge. And then I think another thing that you might want to do to improve your brand and to keep your brand strong would be to broaden your network. If you have 500 people that you follow or 500 that you're interacting with on social media, such as LinkedIn. See if you can grow that by 5 or 10 people a day or 5 or 10 people a week, something that's manageable for you. That way, more people are getting to know your name. And then when you're communicating on LinkedIn, don't just click a like. Give them some feedback on what they've said. Impart your knowledge. These algorithms are all so smart. They are going to share with your network someone else that you have commented on. And then you begin to build your network. Your base of friends has now twofold and threefold. For every friend that you have, you're connected by 1 degree of separation from all of those people. So we find ourselves connected to so many people in what we've already described as a small industry. Someone will notice that they've either been on a webinar with you. If you see someone's name on a webinar, go ahead and figure out who that person is. They're saying something on the webinar, or they made a comment on the webinar. Sometimes the host will, on a webinar, will say, put in the city where you're from. You'll come to realize there are 2 or 3 people in your city or in your state, and you can touch base with them, or even in the chat, you can say hello to someone who you've met at a previous webinar or you know them in person. So keep your network robust. You are associated and people decide who you are based on the company you keep. Keep company with good people that are sharing business with you, are collaborative with you. People want to work with other people that are well liked. The more well liked you are, the stronger your network is, and you're imparting good information. And then invite them along to one of your next volunteer activities.
Fantastic advice. Hey, thanks again, Allison, for joining us. I really appreciate it. Look forward to speaking with you again in the future. Um, I always
Jerry, if you
enjoy
ever need
it.
anything, please let me know. We'd be happy to help.
Okay, and I do appreciate it. And thanks again. Give all of our best to your wonderful partner, Jacob. And I really appreciate what you guys do at Gaffney Austin, helping us at AD. And so there's my endorsement. I think you all do a fabulous job for us. And
Thank you.
certainly I appreciate it. So thanks again. Have a fantastic day. And
Okay,
we'll touch base again soon.
sure. Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks for joining us. I'm confident that you found some nuggets of valuable information that you can apply to your own brand. As Allison pointed out, building your reputation and brand also means preparing for unwanted eventualities. A key takeaway here is hope for the best, prepare for the worst. Thanks again to Allison for taking the time to join us. You can find the Gaffney Austin Agency contact info in the description down below, and we encourage you to reach out to them. Please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel and share this with your friends. We'll see you again soon.